Good morning, it's Friday the 26th of May and this is the Climate Alarm Clock. In this week's headlines, we are heading for uncharted territory as scientists warn that the planet will breach 1.5 degrees of warming in the next 5 years. And researchers in Belfast find that 50% of Earth's species are now in decline, while the debate here about the nature restoration law is heating up. Hello and welcome to the Climate Alarm Clock, your weekly Irish climate news podcast. I'm Anna Pringle and I am joined by Clara Daly as ever. Clara is joining us from an exotic location today. How are you getting on, Clara?
I'm good, Anna. Don't be telling everyone I'm in Roscommon.
She's not in Roscommon. She's in sunny Spain. But we are also delighted to welcome a very special guest this week, and it's one of Ireland's leading, if not Ireland's leading, environmental journalist, John Gibbons. And John has been doing this for quite some time now, and he runs the blog thinkorswim.ie and the website climatechange.ie. And he is a very regular contributor to climate debates in the media and has a column with the Irish Examiner. And despite being so busy and having appeared on Today with Claire Byrne and Up Front with Katie Hannon, he is now here with the Climate Alarm Clock this morning. So we're delighted to have you, John. You're very welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Clara, and Anna, good morning.
Welcome to the loony bin.
Yes, the loony bin is right. So just a reminder, if you like the podcast, this is not directed at you, John, this is directed generally, and you would like to support it, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/the climate alarm. And I have to share our favourite review of the week, which came from one of our friends and colleagues, Patrick Kerwin of the Irish Schools Sustainability Network. I don't know if you guys saw this, but he said he was tuning into us on the way to work, and he said, tough, uncomfortable conversations with laughter dispersed throughout, chuckling through the madness. So I'm not sure if he's talking about us being mad, and that sounds a bit mad, actually, to say we're chuckling through the madness. But I think we have to at least be able to have a laugh every now and then. Now, before we go on to our news for the week, John, just sort of to give us a flavour for how long have you been doing this environmental beat, and and what are some of the trends you've observed during that time? I mean, what's changed since you first started?
Yeah, I guess I first got involved in the public space in early 2008 when I started a weekly climate change column in the Irish Times that ran for about 100 weeks, about 2 years, and I think they had a change of mind actually in early 2010 about climate change, and they decided
it wasn't a big deal.
They really did, and anyway, look, these things happen, I guess. So that was my kind of shall we say induction into the world, because while I'm a journalist by training and background, I had really no background whatsoever in environmental journalism. And I guess it's probably about 20 years ago. So in other words, 5 years before that, when my first child was born, that I began to sort of look into the middle distance and began to pay attention, if you like, to longer term trends. And really, that's what set me off. So I kind of spent the 5 years from, I suppose, 2003 maybe to 2008, kind of, I suppose, coming to terms with if you like, the environmental and the climate space, doing an awful lot of reading, going to a lot of lectures, and basically filling myself in and trying to get my head around an area which to me was alien. Right. And because sometimes it's often said, environmentalists can be shoved into a box saying, well, you guys say that because, that's the way you were brought up or whatever. But I'm far, far from a tree hugger. I was actually brought up on a farm in rural Ireland. And so therefore I won't say I'm the opposite of an environmentalist, but it's certainly not something, not something that is in my DNA, let's say. But however, the facts is the facts. And I am led as a journalist, as a person, I'm very susceptible to facts. And I find factual evidence and scientific evidence very compelling. So I kind of have seconded myself from my own day job, which is, in fact, I'm a co-owner of a publishing business and have been for many years. So I'm in the fortunate position of being able to steal from my employer and steal an awful lot of time to put that time into environmental work, an awful lot of which, of course, as you can imagine, is pro bono. And if I were depending on it for an income, I'd be living under a bridge someplace. So, but that's fine. I mean, I'm in the privileged position of being able to take some time to on this beat. And frankly, there is no more important beat.
Yeah, here, and fair play to you for because it's a lonely road as well for you. I probably less so now that the Irish Times now does have an environmental correspondent, and Caroline O'Doherty and the Independent is doing great work, and so it's probably less so now. But I mean, at the start, the people must have been looking at you like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there's a few excellent people, no doubt about it. There's some excellent work being done in the Examiner and the Business Post, for that matter. It's more mainstream, but it is surprising how many journalists still genuinely see this is completely passed them by. I was reading a guy in the Irish Times the other day, and he was talking about kind of, if you like, doomsday cults. And he was sort of listing off all these things, all these scare stories we've heard down the years about doomsday cults.
Yes.
And he included climate change in it. I'm not going to embarrass him by mentioning his name, but I just read it and I just thought, oh my God, can you really be that long as a senior journalist in Ireland and you've never even read a book on the climate emergency? So it staggers me sometimes the lack of even personal curiosity in some people about it, and I think maybe they've got their minds made up already. But if so, I'm sorry, they've really got to go back and pay more attention to this.
Yeah. Can I ask you, John, like if you're working in this sphere for so long and you're coming up against this kind of like just ignoring of the issue for so often, how do you kind of calm, because I'm getting annoyed just listening to that. How do you calm the frustration or the anger or whatever emotions you feel around it and kind of keep going with it? Because that's just like we were only doing this a year and a half and I'm already like so I can't imagine what I would be like after the length of time you're doing this.
I think it's had the opposite effect on me, Ciara. I've kind of gone into a zen place with this. I kind of feel there's a saying I heard, it relates to the battlefield, and it said that any soldier who enters the battlefield, the only way you can get through the fear and the anxiety is to work on the assumption that you're already dead, and therefore every day that you're not dead is a bonus, right? So to some extent, I kind of think about this. You know, I understand this emergency exquisitely, painfully well, and it's crippling, but I can't allow myself to be crippled by it. So I've found ways of sort of, staunching off my fears and my anxiety, because I feel I'm no use to anybody else if I'm crippled with fear. So, you know the saying on an airplane that in the event of an emergency, put your own mask on first, right? Then you can help other people. Because if you're choking and gasping and angry, you can't help anybody else. So I've done my, if you like, long midnight of the soul. And I'm sure there'll be more of them in the future. And I think at the end of it, I realized that if I want to be an effective communicator in this, I have to do it cold. It's a bit like you don't want a surgeon, for example, who's squeamish, and you don't we've got to be both engaged and yet disengaged. So I feel mentally very engaged, but emotionally I'm able to park those feelings when engaging, because I also realize, and I guess I've done an awful lot of media work, and I force myself to listen back to myself from time to time. And I do realize that oftentimes when people are listening, say, to a radio debate, they don't know the two people or three people on the debate. They don't really know who they are. So they're listening for intonation, and they're trying to decide who's the least crazy person on the call, right? And they'll kind of go, I think I like that person because he sounds less crazy than that person. And I've tried to be the person who sounds less crazy than the other person. Okay. And I
wish that was true. I don't know. You see some of the crazies that they keep trotting out. But
but that's entertainment value. Like what John is saying, when I listen to people like you on the radio, I feel calm. Like it reassures me, because I'm like, oh no, because I have these thoughts, this guy does not sound like an asshole, for lack of a better term. I feel reassured, and it actually, I find it really, really beneficial.
Well, cheers. And you see, I think that's exactly the point I'm making. I I'll admit, in my early days in this, I felt very personally stressed. I think I was overwhelmed by it. Also, I guess young kids at home, my work pressures were much heavier at the time, and I just felt genuinely overwhelmed. And I found myself getting emotional. And I think people realized that they could kind of rile me up. Right. Yeah. And I found sometimes I was being badger baited in discussions, and like an idiot, I was taking the bait. Right.
Yeah.
And one infamous occasion in 2009, when I found myself in an actual shouting match with Pat Kenny on his radio program for half an hour one morning. Right. And apparently it was absolutely gold radio. Right. But it left me feeling devastated. And I'm not kidding. Yeah. I felt physically ill for days after it. And I felt an emotional hangover from it that went on for, I'm not going to embarrass myself by telling you how long I felt bad about that. And I took a lesson away from it. And the lesson is, don't do that again. Because if I was going to behave like that, and by the way, I didn't behave badly, but I allowed myself to get emotionally engaged I allowed myself to be riled up. And it was very clever, by the way, on the part of the other side. They realized that I had a vulnerability, and they exploited it brilliantly. But I realized that I couldn't be useful if I was going to lose the cool on radio. And I made a decision after that. If I'm going to continue to be in the media space, I've got to get a grip on myself. And I've tried to work on that ever since. And so this is the new, all-improved 2.0 semi-sane version of me here before you.
So our goal for today is to try to get John riled up. Let's see if we
Good luck.
No, I'm kidding. But I mean, it's very interesting, and you're right. One of the things we do here is we do get into rants, but I think podcasting is a different kind of space, and it does give us the space to have those conversations and be honest about our emotions when they come up, so it's a very interesting point. But you're right, you are very effective because you always do come across as calm and reasonable, no matter who you're up against. So well done for sticking that out and going through that journey. I'm sure it hasn't been easy at times.
And it's not over, of course. It's always evolving, and you're always trying to learn from. And they say if you don't win the argument, at least you learn the lesson and take it on to the next argument, because there's always the next argument. So I do try to be as self-critical as possible to try and improve the argument, because it's so bloody important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time to come and join us, John. Really appreciate it. So will we talk about some of those important stories? And the first story that we are going to look at is the warning from the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO. And they came out after we recorded last week. Actually, when we hit record last week, I was like, damn, we just missed some great stories here. But this came out just after we finished, where the WMO is now predicting that we will be more than 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels of global temperature for at least 1 year between 2023 and 2027. So now there is a 66% likelihood that will happen. And that's kind of a lot of stats in there. But what that boils down to is it looks like we are going to exceed that Paris Agreement 1.5 degree target much earlier than expected, and most likely within the next 5 years. So I kind of look at that and I go, is this really the only story? This is such a huge story, and it has gotten some coverage, but it's just it's a stunning story, really, in a lot of ways.
It's really scary.
It is. Now, they do say we won't permanently exceed the 1.5 degree level. And some people have I was interested to see Michael Mann, who's a very well-known climate scientist. He was sort of saying that everybody's been a bit doomy by saying, oh, we're going to exceed because it's not permanent. But it does mean that for 1 year, the average temperature will be above 1.5 degrees. Whereas currently it's at around 1.1, 1.2. So that's a big change, really. So it's not permanent, so there will still be fluctuations, but I think what the WMO is saying is that it will be more frequent that we will exceed it in any given year. So even though it's not permanent, it reminds me of, in Ireland when the weather forecast goes, there's going to be showers, and eventually the showers are going to join up and become rain. So this is kind of what strikes me about this. It's going to be temporary until it's not, and it looks like it's all heading in the wrong direction.
On, the analogy you made there to the weather forecast, sometimes the weather forecast gets the weather wrong.
It does.
So what I want to ask you is, it had said in that report or in that article that for the years 2017 to 2021, the likelihood of exceeding the 1.5 degrees was 10%. And now it's leaped up or increased up to 66%. Is that right? The likelihood. But what I want to ask is, if the WMO were wrong in their initial estimations, is there a possibility, were they wrong? Why is that increase taken such a huge leap? Were they wrong in the first instance? Were they conservative in their initial estimations? Do we genuinely need to panic about this? I'm playing a devil advocate here.
Well, if I can take that one, I think science is always a moving target. It's never a fixed point. So that's the best estimate at that time. And then as more data comes in, and of course, as more pollution goes up, right? Because you have to remember, this is the whole situation is fluid and dynamic. And they've got to keep reassessing. What we do find generally over time is that the estimates are getting more accurate. The range of inaccuracy is being reduced, and the modeling is getting better. And also, of course, we can also hindcast many of these models. In other words, we can run the same model runs backwards to see how they would have anticipated what actually happened. And what we're finding is that models are getting really, really good at this. And a lot of the wrinkles in the early models have been sort of leveled out or ironed out. And now, unfortunately, these models they're telling us that the rate of change is accelerating. I think that's the clearest thing that's coming through. And the 1.5 degrees, I know it is a totemic number. And yes, we may shoot through it, and yes, we may fall back again. I don't share Michael Mann's sense of calm about this, because if we were on some kind of global trajectory to rapidly reduce emissions across all sectors, then I would say, sure, we can afford an overshoot, and we will overshoot. But we're not. We're still pumping between, depending on how you calculate it, between 36 and 50 billion tons of carbon and carbon equivalent, including methane and other gases, into the atmosphere every year. And of course, in the case of CO2, these are basically forever gases. They'll be there heating the planet up for the next 100, maybe 500, maybe 1,000 years. And, yes, we will bounce under and over the 1.5 degree level. But once we finally breach 1.5, we're heading on for 2, we're heading on for 2.5, we're heading on for 2.7, maybe even 3 degrees this century. We're heading into a completely different world, and that's the message. And I think to echo Anna's point, I find it just completely baffling that this isn't front page news every single day of the week. This is the unraveling of the life support systems for our planet. And yet, somehow or other, this is, I think, what somebody described as a hyper object. It's so vast in every sense that it's almost like the air that surrounds us. It's everywhere. We depend on it, and yet it's completely invisible to us.
Yeah. That's encouraging.
Yeah, really. But I mean, and don't forget too that 2.7 degrees or 3 degrees of heating that we're on track for is with the action plans that are currently in place. That's if those action plans are actually implemented.
That's completely correct, Anna. That is at the moment on our current trajectory, those figures represent an absolute best case scenario.
Wow. So actually we could be, if we're honest with ourselves, on track for even higher.
Sure. And also, what we also have to consider are feedbacks. For example, I was reading a piece the other day about the massive increase in coal burning in India and in China. Yep. And why are they burning more coal? Because they're having monster heat waves, which is forcing more and more people to depend on air conditioning, which is overwhelming the grid, which is causing them to recommission more and more coal-fired plants. So that's called, as you know, a positive feedback. But unfortunately, that's in the scientific sense of the word. From our point of view, there's nothing positive about it at all. But it underlines the point that you can get what are sometimes described as cascading failures, where one system trips a bit like a trip switch in a house, and it sets off the other switches to trip. And at the moment, we're beginning. Well, I don't say beginning. Who am I kidding? We're well into the point where our basic systems are breaking down one after the other. And the clearest way I think about this is to take the Stockholm Resilience Centre's work they've done on the 9 key planetary boundaries. These are the, as we know, the limits within which humanity has to remain inside these planetary limits in order to maintain a safe space for operation. We have breached 5 of these 9 limits, and to translate that into human terms, that's like saying that you've got heart failure, liver disease, your pancreas is shot, and your kidneys are failing. These
your eyesight's great.
Yeah,
your eyesight's great. So you're grand,
exactly.
And watch it all burn.
And I think it's a thing, and I suppose it is a strange thing. We have to get everything right. We have to get the biodiversity part right. We've got to get the ecosystem restoration part right. We've got to get the climate part right. We have to fix all of these things simultaneously. It isn't sufficient, by the way, that we magic up a way of reducing global temperatures. If the ecological collapse continues at full pace, we're snookered anyway. So it's a all of the above. And I know I often speak with people from the ecology argument, and they feel that the climate people like me, get too much airtime, and they say, we're ignoring biodiversity, and I think they have a point, because the climate issue, I know we say it doesn't get enough coverage, but it gets a hell of a lot more than biodiversity, and yet biodiversity is, in terms of human thriving, and more to the point, human survival. We can't do that without a functioning ecosystems. This is so obvious. I'm almost ashamed to have to say it. But every public presentation I give, I make the point that our economic and our social systems are wholly owned subsets of a functioning biosphere. Because it's incredible to have to say that to people, but you just have to remind them that you try all your economic and social dreams and hopes inside a dead landscape. Nothing works, and yet here we are saying the obvious over and over again.
But look, that brings us to our other big story this week about the researchers at Queen's found that 50% of Earth's species are now in decline. So it's more than previously thought. They looked at it a different way, and they said this is And this seems to be a recurring theme in all these spheres, is that it's worse than we previously thought, or it's accelerating. But they are finding that 50% are in decline now. And we are so disconnected from that. When you see, and to your point, John, about, I don't think we even think about everything we do being connected to the biosphere, or that we are part of the biosphere. I think it's outside of our day-to-day comprehension about it, I think, which is obviously a problem for us and a problem for the biosphere.
I think that's fair. We do know, and again, one of the numbers that I use on this is from Václav Smil, and he looks at it from a number of different points of view. One of them, which really sticks in my mind, is to consider mammals on Earth, and consider that humans and our livestock now comprise 95.8% of the mammalian biomass on our planet. It's just a breathtaking number. And another number that I kind of often use in association with that is that the year that I started primary school, 1970, to 2020, take that 50-year period, we have lost 69% of the wild animals in the world by quantity, have disappeared. So that's 69% in 50 years. We're losing them at more than the rate of 1% per annum. And these are the unraveling.
Those are the ones we know about, because we don't even know about all the insects.
Indeed. Now, many of these, in fairness, Anna, are estimates across various. These are not just mammalian, by the way. This is right across amphibians, etc. So it is across the animal kingdom. We also know that 70% of the world's birds are chickens and turkeys. They're livestock, right? And it is something we need to come to terms with, that we have fundamentally re-engineered. One species has fundamentally re-engineered planet Earth for its own benefit. And you might say, well, go us, right? And in a sense, we're an incredibly successful species in the narrowest sense of the word. I think you've got to go back to
We're an invasive species is what we are. I saw somebody, I don't know where I saw that, somebody describing humans as an invasive species, as in they come in and destroy the ecosystem everywhere. And actually E.O. Wilson, who's a famous biologist, described that how when humans arrived in Hawaii or New Zealand or, pick a place, the first thing to go was the big mammals.
Yes.
Because the humans would kill them. And any of the big animals were destroyed. And then the ecosystem was changed radically. So we're the worst invasive species.
Yeah, we certainly are, and at least that's how we play out. Let's just say if the rest of the species on Earth could have a citizens' assembly, let's say, right, they would vote us off. There's no question about that. And I suppose, in a sense, it's the accumulation of our overpowered brains. Our ability to utilize the world around us, our ability, for example, to harness, fossilized animal juice from or plant juice from 150 million years ago, and we have this incredible technical ability, and yet the part of our brains that our philosophical development lags, I think, centuries behind. We're still behaving as if we were just stumbling off the Serengeti. And yet here we are, this hyper species. We've invaded every corner of the planet. Our impacts now can be measured from the seafloor to the edge of space and everywhere in between. And yet at no point have we developed the ability to reflect on what that means, to be part of a living planet. And I think that disconnection, rather than narrowing, I think it's increasing. And I think,
the more threatened we are, the less we are willing to engage with it. I mean, you said we're not even willing to reflect. We're not even willing to reflect on our economic system or our social institutions that we've built ourselves. So we're not even willing to reflect on those in the context of what we're doing to the planet. Never mind the whole bigger picture.
Yeah, and I mean, to take economics for a moment, as you know, our president, Michael D., made a famous intervention on economics recently, and he was 100% correct. I mean, as in relation to the living planet and in relation to biophysical reality, economics is it's a shell game. We've been sold the notion that we can have infinite growth, and it's so absurd that a child in 5th or 6th class in primary school can tell you, well, sorry, sir or miss, nothing. Of course, nothing can grow forever. At some point, it has to level out. Yet our economic gurus say, no, we can solve every problem by just having more growth. So are you unhappy about inequality? Oh, well, we're not going to fix that. We'll just have some growth. And we'll have some growth, and then we'll trickle down to the poors. So we won't have to fix inequality. We'll just grow our way out of it. Have you got debt? Don't worry. We'll grow our way out of it to service the debt. So all our problems, we've developed this cure-all elixir called growth. The problem with this elixir is, of course, it's highly toxic. And to make sense of this crazy elixir that we're guzzling down, I often think of William Nordhaus, the famous, the so-called father of climate economics, who won a Nobel, such as it is in economics, in 2018. And in his Nobel speech, William Nordhaus, the most senior climate economist in the world, said, and I quote, that the optimal temperature this century, where we balance the impacts on humans with the cost of the economy, is 4 degrees centigrade. This is a cult. Yeah. This is an absolute cult.
It's 4 degrees centigrade above.
Above pre-industrial, levels. Yeah. We're talking about basically what our most senior, our most revered economist, right? The guy put up in a plinth by his colleagues, the guy who has inspired a generation of economists, is effectively, for all intents and purposes, this is a death cult.
Yep.
So shout out to economists, say.
And I'm like, I mean, even we've seen reports this week. I mean, if you see the floods in northern Italy in the last couple of weeks, where you had, I think, 12,000 people or more were displaced by those.
13 dead.
30,000.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. I mean, and then Pakistan just on a scale much worse last year. So we're already seeing those effects, but yet we're getting the headlines in Ireland that, Ireland might have a Mediterranean climate. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, that was a particularly depressing headline. And I'm sorry to say, but I trace it back to an interview given by a UCC scientist who used that exact phrase. Then he qualified it in the next sentence saying, well, it mightn't suit us. But you see, the damage was done. And this is something that science communicators, including scientists, really need to understand. If you throw out hostages to fortune like that, then it's hard to blame the media when they snap them up. Now, mind you, it's still possible. But I listened to that interview and I'm afraid I just had my head in my hands saying, you never say that. When you say Mediterranean-style climate, everyone in Ireland goes, high five, high five, we're going to be going grapes in Glenageary, right?
Yeah.
This, unfortunately, is just nonsensical. And I think we as communicators, and anyone is a communicator, as soon as you start talking on this subject, before you do that, you really need to reflect on your language really, really carefully.
Right. So we have to be very careful now, Ciara.
Climate alarm clock shuts down.
No bad language anymore.
Well, you know what I mean. I think you see there are so many people out there looking for a Pollyanna solution to this.
A soundbite.
And a soundbite and a headline. And the problem is headlines like that, they're lapped up, they're swept around social media. And people like us spend months trying to undo the damage from one headline like that. And it's just, it's so, oh my God,
here's an example. Here's an example from this week where on RTE, farmers are worried over the impact of re-wetting peatlands. And John, I know you've been out on this, and this is in the context of the European nature restoration law, and you kind of look at that and go, what could be wrong with a law that looks at trying to restore nature? But yet the headline is farmers are worried about re-wetting. And I know you were on the other night on Upfront with Katie Hannon on this, John, and one of the things that really frustrates me about this is nowhere have I seen a description or a proper definition of what re-wetting actually is. So
before you go into re-wetting,
yes.
Can you what is the nature restoration law? Because I'm ashamed to say it in front of John Gibbons, but I have not been reading these stories. So give me the quick rundown, please.
Sure. This is a draft law that's been pushed through been developed by the European Commission, and it's rumbling through the European Parliament. And the idea is to have a restoration of 20% of the land and the seas in the European Union by 2030. It's connected to the EU biodiversity strategy, which wants to see us reduce our use of pesticides and basically to ease the pressure on nature. Basically, to call, I won't say call off the war on nature, but to have a truce and leave nature some room to survive. Anna, you mentioned E.O. Wilson earlier. He wrote a famous book called Half Earth. And the thesis of that book, for those who haven't read it, is that in order for humans to survive, and indeed in order for life on Earth to survive, we have to basically give up half the land space of the planet and give it back to nature to allow natural systems to simply recuperate in order to sustain life on Earth. That was the basic premise of his book. And of course, people said, yeah, it's impossible. You can't do it. It's unfair. We need blah, blah, blah. But it's really simple choice. We either make space for nature or we accept collapse. That's the choice we have. And unfortunately, like in that debate the other night, that's the point I tried, probably failed to make, that we're in the throes of the 6th mass extinction event. This is a global emergency for which we have no precedent. This is an all hands on deck moment, not a pointing fingers and demanding that everybody bar ourselves does something. And yet that, I'm sorry to say, that message hasn't landed. And people, particularly, unfortunately, many people who see themselves as custodians of rural Ireland, are determined, in fact, to turn this into some kind of culture war, to suggest that it's just Greenies, Dublin, South Dublin Greenies who are trying to do us down for some reason or other and drive. What was the phrase they used?
They want to flood our land.
They want to flood the land and drive us off the land. I mean, some of the stats that I didn't get to use the other night, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to reprise them today. Right. Let me give you this one, right? Peatlands cover 3% of the land surface of the world, yet they hold twice the carbon of all the world's forests combined.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, they're second only to the oceans in terms of carbon sequestration.
That is correct. Yeah. And not only that, but healthy peatlands absorb on average 4 to 8 tonnes of CO2 per hectare per annum. Unhealthy drained peatlands emit up to 40 tonnes of CO2 per annum. Unfortunately, people whose job is driving a bulldozer or an excavator out onto those bogs don't give a damn. And this is what we're up against. We're up against people who are making money out of this, against people who are trying to stand up and defend nature. And you'll find the folks, I'm sure you've heard the phrase that it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. I think that's the famous Upton Sinclair line. But this is the situation that we're in, that narrow vested interests, who, I might add, have achieved almost complete capture of government. They have,
the media.
And, well, sadly, they seem to have bewitched the media. Yep. But they've captured government and bewitched the media. And we see the media allowing itself to have existential arguments framed in terms of narrow sectoral interests. And I'll tell you, this will be chiseled on our headstone. How did we let this happen? And it's a media failure writ large.
Can I go back and ask about the nature restoration law? So
bring us back, Ciara. Go on.
Yep.
No, just because I was wondering the other day when I was watching Katie Hannon's show, is it a law? Like, it's being proposed by the EU, but it's not a law in Ireland just yet, is it?
No, it isn't. It hasn't gotten through the European Parliament yet. Now, if it gets through the European Parliament, it will be transposed automatically into Irish law, so it will become a law. It is less. It requires us to do less than our own climate action plan, number one. But it is a favourite blood sport in Ireland of blaming Europe for everything, right? It's fabulous for politicians to point at those awful Europeans, the ones who keep giving us money and improving our roads and insisting that we bring in humane laws, those awful Europeans who keep telling us what to do and how to live our lives. So this nature restoration, at the moment, it's not a law. It hasn't been enacted.
Yeah.
And in fact, concerted efforts are being made to kill it at birth, to make sure it never gets through. Because a related part of it is the EU's farm to fork strategy, which again dates back a year or two. And this was all about easing the pressure particularly from the agricultural systems. Yeah. And again, you might say, why do we keep going on about agriculture? It's just a fact of life that most of the land of Europe is occupied by agriculture. That's just the way it goes. And therefore, you can't have land restoration without agricultural reform. And we see at the moment, for example, the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, the planning and the funding for CAP is largely determined by powerful agri-industrial lobbyists like Copa Cogia, and who are the big agri-lobby group to which various Irish organisations are affiliated. And they exercise enormous power in the halls of Europe at making sure that as much money as possible gets transferred from the European taxpayer into the pockets of the agri-industrial PLCs. They pay lip service, obviously, to the interests of farmers, but mostly it's about agri PLCs. But they've captured the farm lobby, who in many cases, and I would say in Ireland as well, many parts of the farm lobby are like the out offices of the agri PLCs. They do an awful lot of the dirty work for the agri PLCs.
Right, and they are very much in tune with our government, unfortunately. What we are seeing also is that we have MEPs, Irish MEPs from Sinn Féin, from Fianna Fáil, from Fine Gael, all working against getting this law through the European Parliament as well. So we have, as one of our actions coming up later, is to make sure to get on to our MEPs and let them know how we feel about this. So in terms of, I think we are probably almost out of time.
I have one more thing I want to say.
Oh, because, go on, Ciara.
I am from the countryside and I can feel it inside of me. Last night, so I was watching back the Katie Hannon show last night. We were recording this on Thursday, yada, yada, yada. But I really do feel empathy for farmers. I like the farmer lobbying groups.
Do not represent them.
Yeah, there's I know lots of farmers that don't share those views and that don't want, and I can also understand as a business owner how sometimes when you're up against the wall and you're not sure where the money is going to come from and you've been pushed into a corner by a certain group, and then you're listening to people who are like you, that you think are like you, and they're fear mongering. It's just there's a whole economic system of emotions in the lobby in the farming industry, if that analogy makes any sense at all. But yeah, I think I'm just saying it because I noticed as we were having this conversation, I do feel a little bit of uncomfort of like, oh, the poor farmers, don't be at them. So yeah, it's just a really, really complex kind of issue, isn't it?
Is, yeah.
I really do kind of feel for people not affected by this law, but affected by this conversation, the emotion that this conversation stirs, because it's very difficult when you're being scaremongered.
I think you're right, Ciara, and I did try to make that point the other night, that there are cynical people, and I included Michael Fitzmaurice, so if I named him there, I'll name him here, who are making political capital out of stirring up fears, and also, by the way, out of spreading division and discord between, for example, people in rural Ireland and environmentalists. They want to other people who are concerned, who have, I believe, legitimate concerns about climate, about environment. They want to other us, and the reason they want to do that is that it's a lot easier than addressing the actual questions that have been put forward. Absolutely. You simply demonize the individual. And I completely agree with you. I said, having grown up in rural Ireland, many people, I would suggest most people in rural Ireland, the same as most people in urban Ireland, given half a chance, most people are basically decent. But sometimes we can be easily led, and we can certainly be easily misled. And now in the era of WhatsApp groups and social media, the viral spread of hate and of ugly rhetoric, I'm sorry, it is now on steroids. And as somebody on the receiving end of this from time to time, I recognise it. But I also recognise that they're not the people that I bump into when I'm down in rural Ireland, as I am pretty regularly. Most people, one-to-one, are fantastic. Like you go and chat to a farmer and they'll tell you about what they're doing. They'll tell you their issues, their challenges and so on. And they'll look you in the eye and you'll have a proper conversation. But this isn't what happens with the rhetoric coming out of farming groups. So I'm glad you brought that point up, Ciara. I think it's incredibly important not to play the game and to get involved in the name and shame thing here. My focus, and I hope I've been clear about this, has been on groups like Copa Cogia and their Irish equivalents, and on cynical politicians. It is not. It really isn't, because they're the ones who are making political hay and economic hay out of misleading people in rural Ireland, because everyone in rural Ireland suffers when water quality collapses, when air quality suffers, and when we get a biodiversity collapse. Everyone in rural Ireland suffers. And I think this idea of playing the urban, to be honest, the urban-rural card, is the oldest trope in the books, on the book. And really, personally, as somebody who has grew up in rural Ireland, lives now in an urban area, but has one foot in and out of rural Ireland on a weekly basis. I'll be in Kilkenny at the weekend. I really, really object to this attempt at driving a wedge. And I know there are people say, well, people like me, by speaking out on this, we're inflaming the situation. And in a sense, I understand that criticism. But I wish that it was the agricultural organisations that were engaging on climate change. For example, if you go to the IFA's so-called environment page, their environment committee page, basically its whole remit is to challenge environmental regulation. They have no engagement. There isn't a single article that I've ever found on the IFA's website explaining to farmers about the climate emergency and how it'll affect their future. Now, you might say, well, why should they? But if you go to the NFU, the National Farmers Union, the UK Union website, which I have done, it is full of information about the science of climate change. So what is it in Ireland that makes our agricultural representative organisations so refractory, so anti-science. And it breaks my heart because Irish farmers are not refractory and anti-science, but their leadership are. And I don't get it. And I think as well, the leadership like to hide behind the members and say, if you criticise, our policy, you're attacking farmers. And I'm sorry, that is a lazy, lazy trope.
Yeah. In fact, if you go to the IFA website, you'll find them boasting about how their lobbying helped water down the climate action law in 2021, for example. They actually say that publicly.
Oh, yeah.
They're delighted that their lobbying worked well with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So they're very clear about it. They're not really hiding that at all, but it is a real absence of leadership, I think, on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah, and I've written about this a number of times, including in the Business Post, how the European Union have sent people to Ireland to point out that Ireland, almost uniquely in Europe, demonises environmental defenders.
Yeah,
they've actually pointed out that we have a particularly bad record of attacking environmental defenders in this country. They singled out, for example, these concerted attacks and attempts at defunding on Tashka when it stood up to Glanbia over the cheese factory down in Waterford, and unprecedented attacks. If you go onto the Fine Gael website, you'll say there's one headline I saw that said, I think it's An Taisce is the biggest threat to rural Ireland.
Yeah, they described An Taisce as terrorists, eco-terrorists, and the weaponized wing of the environmental movement. Those were actual words that they used. Yeah. So I'm going to shift us now because I think we could probably have a program on each of those topics, and definitely I want to bring you back for that, John.
Sure, I'm there for it.
There's so much in all of those topics that just lead to great discussion. But I thought we might finish with a little
song.
Yeah, we like to have some musical interludes on this show. So one of the headlines that caught my attention this week was chaos at the Shell AGM. Speaking of companies that are burning the planet for profit, the Shell AGM was disrupted by climate protesters, but I thought they had a particularly interesting way of doing it. So let's have a listen to what they did.
Go to hell, Shell, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Go to hell, Shell, and don't you come back no more. Now listen, don't you say we're not green. These new operations in the old North Sea, they got permission from the NSTA, so don't you put the blame on me. Sit down! Go to hell, Shell, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more.
Okay, that gives us a flavour of it, but Go to Hell, Shell, it's very catchy, I think, and maybe we could add an IFA version in there as well.
I thought you were going to play Dolly Parton. Have you heard her amazing new song?
Oh, you're
she.
No.
I mean, if you didn't like Dolly Parton enough already, which I must admit I do, she has a new climate change song, and it includes the wonderful line about "kick 'em in the ass," which I'm not sure what she rhymed with ass, but she's basically saying, these people are trying to kill us, and we need to kick them in the ass.
Excellent.
Oh my God, she is such a legend.
She's such a hero, maybe that'll feature. We can have a Dolly segment on a future episode.
Okay, go to hell, Shell, and kick them in the ass, Dolly. Well said. So I think one of our actions for this week will be and we'll put a link in the show notes, write to your MEPs and TDs about the nature restoration law. There are petitions to sign. Tell them how important it is and that we want to see it going through. And so we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Any other actions from anyone? Or will we wrap it up?
I found a petition from Greenpeace to ban private jets, so we can put that in the show notes as well.
Very good. Excellent. So let's take some action. I think that's what keeps us all ticking over and out of the sea of despair. John, thank you so much for joining us. And really, it's great to hear you having time to tell us more about your thoughts and share some of the stats and the stories. They don't give you enough time on Irish media, I would say. So it was great to have this opportunity with you. It's really, really appreciated.
No, delighted to be here, and exactly that. I do love the long form, the podcast, and also where possible to try to use it to reach audiences beyond. I mean, this is a great audience. I think the Climate Alarm Clock, am I allowed to say this, does a great job.
Yes.
Okay, we've got that out of the way. Yeah, and but for example, I appear from time to time, say with Eamon Dunphy on his podcast, which is a completely different audience, Mario Rosenstock and so on, and I love these conversations, but I do also really like to do some outreach as well to get into the places that are not having these conversations, because that's where, we need to cover all our bases. The conversation we have this morning, I hope it's useful. I've certainly enjoyed it, but we also need to make sure we're reaching beyond our bubbles, and that's part of my commitment, is to try to reach across where possible, and to kind of find people where they are, and hit them with some science, and hopefully encourage some engagement, at least some thought, because we're in a pickle, and it's probably best that we kind of pull together to get ourselves out of this particular jam if we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for all that you do, John, and keep up the great work. And we're all big fans, so delighted to have you on. So that is it for this week. If you enjoyed the conversation, please share the podcast. I think everybody needs to hear it. Share it outside your bubble, maybe, so that we can have a broader conversation about it. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, as that helps us reach more listeners, and share it with people who might like to hear it. And then finally, our reminder that we are completely voluntary, and if you would like to support the work we do, you can do that through buymeacoffee.com/The Climate Alarm. That's it for this week. Thank you, John, and thank you, Ciara, and we will be back next week, hopefully. All going well.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Ciara.
Ciao.
Bye. Go to hell, Shell, and kick them in the ass, Dolly.